She pretended to be the CEO's wife to save a dying old lady. But the moment the powerful CEO discovered the lie, instead of exposing her, he refused to let her go. The room remained frozen. Sophia could hear her own heartbeat. Every instinct told her to stand up immediately, apologize, and explain everything. This was Ethan Kingston, a billionaire CEO whose signature could move markets. A man whose companies employed tens of thousands of people. A man she had only seen on magazine covers and television interviews. And she had just pretended to be his wife. In front of doctors, nurses, hospital administrators, and his own mother. Sophia slowly rose from her chair. "I can explain." Ethan lifted a hand. The simple gesture silenced her. His eyes remained fixed on the heart monitor beside Alina's bed. The numbers were stable. Much more stable than the medical reports his doctors had shown him earlier that morning. For weeks, Alina's condition had been deteriorating. Nothing had worked. Not medication. Not therapy. Not expensive specialists flown in from different countries. Yet somehow, the moment this stranger appeared, everything changed. Alina squeezed Sophia's hand. "Don't leave," she pleaded softly. "You promised." A flash of fear crossed her face. The monitor immediately reacted. Its steady rhythm began rising again. The doctors exchanged nervous glances. Ethan noticed. So did Sophia. The chief physician stepped forward. "Mr. Kingston, we should discuss this privately." Minutes later, Ethan stood with the doctors outside the room while Sophia remained beside Alina. The old woman refused to release her hand. Behind the glass window, Sophia could see the serious expressions on their faces. The physician spoke carefully. "Your mother's emotional attachment to this belief is stronger than we realized." Ethan's jaw tightened. "What exactly are you saying?" "We're saying her condition improves when she believes your wife is present." "My wife doesn't exist." "We know that." The doctor paused. "But the improvement is real." Inside the room, Alina smiled peacefully while talking to Sophia. The contrast was impossible to ignore. For the first time in months, she looked happy. Ethan stared through the glass. A memory surfaced unexpectedly. 10 years earlier, a young woman laughing beneath a tree. Claire, the only woman he had ever planned to marry. The only woman his mother had truly loved. The accident that took Claire had changed everything. After her death, Ethan buried himself in work. Kingston Global expanded from a successful corporation into a billion-dollar empire. Business magazines praised him. Investors admired him. Competitors feared him. But none of those achievements filled the emptiness Claire left behind. His mother saw it. She always had. And perhaps that was why her mind kept creating the daughter-in-law she never got to meet. The doctor interrupted his thoughts. "If this continues, we may be able to stabilize her long enough for further treatment." Ethan looked back toward the room. Toward Sophia. Toward the woman who had walked into his life less than an hour ago. A complete stranger. Yet somehow, she had accomplished what medicine could not. When he re-entered the room, Sophia immediately stood. "Mr. Kingston, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean." "You were trying to help her." The response surprised everyone, including Sophia. "I lied." "Yes." "You should be angry." "Probably." The corner of Ethan's mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. Then his expression became serious again. "My mother believes you're her daughter-in-law." Sophia lowered her eyes. "I know. And right now, that belief is helping her survive." Sophia didn't know what to say. Neither did the nurses. The silence stretched. Then Ethan shocked the entire room. "For now, we continue." Sophia blinked. "What?" "You heard me." You want me to keep pretending? For my mother's sake. The words were calm, logical, reasonable. Yet something in his eyes suggested there was more. Something he wasn't saying. Near the doorway, another man had quietly arrived. He wore an expensive suit, similar to Ethan's. His expression darkened as he watched Sophia. Victor Kingston, Ethan's cousin, executive vice president of Kingston Global, and the man who expected to inherit enormous influence if Ethan remained unmarried. Nobody noticed the calculating look in Victor's eyes. Nobody noticed how carefully he studied Sophia's face. But somewhere deep inside his memory, a familiar surname would soon resurface. A surname connected to a scandal buried years ago. A scandal that had destroyed a good man. And unknowingly tied Sophia Bennett to the Kingston family long before this day. As Elena happily introduced Sophia to another nurse as her daughter-in-law, Victor quietly turned away. Something about this situation troubled him. And for the first time in years, he felt a dangerous sense of uncertainty. Because sometimes the smallest lies uncover the biggest secrets. Sophia Bennett was just an ordinary young woman struggling to survive, with no wealth, no influence, and no connection to the powerful Kingston family. Yet one desperate decision inside a hospital room changed everything. An elderly woman lay fighting for her life, crying uncontrollably for the daughter-in-law she believed would come for her. Doctors feared another emotional shock could kill her. With seconds running out and nobody knowing what to do, Sophia stepped forward and did the unthinkable. She took the old lady's trembling hand and pretended to be the CEO's wife. The miracle was immediate. The old lady calmed down. Her heartbeat stabilized, and her life was saved. But there was a problem. The woman Sophia had just called Mom was the mother of Ethan Kingston, the cold, powerful CEO who had never been married. Then the CEO walked into the room. He saw a complete stranger pretending to be his wife. He heard his mother call her daughter-in-law. And what happened next made absolutely no sense. Why didn't the CEO expose her lie? Why did he agree to keep the secret? What did he see in Sophia that nobody else could see? And why would a billionaire CEO eventually refuse to let the woman who pretended to be his wife walk out of his life? Sophia Bennett had never imagined that a simple visit to St. Andrew's Hospital would place her in the path of one of the richest men in the country. The 27-year-old lived in a modest apartment on the edge of the city. Her furniture was old. Her savings account was nearly empty. Every month was a battle between rent, bills, and survival. Yet nobody who met her could tell how much pain she carried. 5 years earlier, her father, Michael Bennett, had died believing the world saw him as a criminal. The memory still haunted her. Michael had once owned a respected financial consulting firm. Their family had lived comfortably, not wealthy, but secure. Then came the scandal. His business partner disappeared with millions of dollars. Evidence mysteriously pointed toward Michael. Clients abandoned him. Friends vanished. The stress crushed him. Sophia could still remember sitting beside his hospital bed during his final days. His hands had become thin, his voice weak, but his eyes remained kind. "Promise me something," he had whispered. "What is it, Dad?" "No matter what people do to you, don't stop helping others." That promise had shaped every decision she made since. It was why she now stood inside this hospital room, holding the hand of a stranger. Across from her sat Elena Kingston. Even through illness, Elena carried traces of elegance. She had once been one of the most admired women in elite social circles. For decades, she had stood beside her late husband, Richard Kingston, as they built the Kingston Empire. Their company eventually expanded into technology, real estate, and international investments. The Kingston family became worth billions. But wealth had never protected Elena from loneliness. Her husband had died 8 years earlier. Not long after, A series of strokes began stealing pieces of her memory. Some days, she remembered everything. Other days, she became trapped inside old memories. One memory returned more than any other. Her son getting married. Except it had never happened. The room suddenly grew quiet. Alina stared into Sophia's eyes. "My daughter-in-law," she whispered. Sophia forced a gentle smile. "Yes, Mom, I'm here." Tears rolled down Alina's cheeks. "I knew you would come." The heart monitor stabilized further. A nurse quietly wiped her eyes. Even the doctor looked relieved. Then footsteps echoed from the hallway. Heavy, confident, purposeful. Several nurses immediately straightened. One doctor adjusted his coat. Hospital administrators appeared almost instantly. The reaction confused Sophia. Then she noticed everyone looking toward the doorway. A tall man entered. His tailored black suit probably cost more than 6 months of Sophia's salary. His expensive watch reflected the hospital lights. His sharp features carried the cold confidence of someone accustomed to power. This was Ethan Kingston, 34 years old, CEO of Kingston Global Holdings, billionaire, business genius, one of the most influential men in the country. The same man whose business magazines described as ruthless. The same man who had not been linked romantically to any woman for nearly a decade. And at that very moment, he was staring directly at the stranger pretending to be his wife. The room became completely silent. Sophia's heart pounded. She expected anger. She expected security. She expected humiliation. Instead, Ethan looked first at his mother, then at the monitor, then back at Sophia. A strange expression flashed across his face. Not anger. Not confusion. Recognition. As though something about her reminded him of someone he had once known. Then Alina smiled brightly. "There you are," she said to him. "Your wife finally came." Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. And Ethan's next response would change all of their lives forever. The following morning, Sophia woke up convinced the entire situation would be over. Surely Ethan Kingston had only agreed to the arrangement for one night. Surely his mother's condition would improve. Surely she would return to her ordinary life. But at exactly 8 o'clock, her phone rang. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar number. "Miss Bennett," a calm voice asked. "Yes." "This is Daniel Reed, Mr. Kingston's executive assistant. Mr. Kingston would like you to visit St. Andrew's Hospital today." Sophia nearly dropped her phone. The arrangement wasn't over. Not even close. 2 hours later, she stood outside the hospital, nervously adjusting her simple blue dress. Nearby, luxury vehicles lined the entrance. Business executives entered and exited through private doors. The world around her felt completely different from the one she knew. She had spent years counting every dollar. Meanwhile, the Kingston family lived in a reality where money solved almost every problem. Almost. As she entered Alina's room, the old woman's face immediately brightened. "There she is," Alina exclaimed. "My beautiful daughter-in-law." Sophia smiled warmly. "Good morning, Mom." The old woman reached for her hand. To everyone's surprise, Alina's blood pressure remained stable throughout the morning. Doctors quietly documented every improvement. The results were impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, Ethan watched from a distance. He sat in a corner, reviewing business reports on a tablet, yet his attention repeatedly drifted toward Sophia. She wasn't acting. At least not entirely. There was something genuine about the way she spoke to his mother. Something impossible to fake. Most people treated Alina as a patient. Sophia treated her like family. The difference was becoming increasingly obvious. During lunch, Alina suddenly asked a question. "When are you two giving me grandchildren?" Sophia nearly choked on her water. Ethan lowered his coffee cup. Even the nurse struggled not to laugh. "Mom," Ethan warned. "What?" Eleanor replied innocently. "I'm old, I'm allowed to ask." The room filled with unexpected warmth. For a brief moment, Ethan found himself remembering a time before loss had hardened him. A time when laughter had been normal. A time when Claire was still alive. The memory struck unexpectedly. Years earlier, Claire had asked him a similar question during a picnic. "Do you think we'll have children someday?" He had smiled and said yes. 6 months later, she was gone. Since then, he had avoided thinking about the future. Avoided thinking about family. Avoided thinking about love. Yet somehow, this stranger kept disrupting the walls he had built around himself. Across town, however, someone else was becoming interested in Sophia Bennett. Victor Kingston sat inside his office on the top floor of Kingston Global Headquarters. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. The office alone was larger than Sophia's entire apartment. A private investigator stood across from his desk. "I want everything on her." The investigator nodded. "Everything." Victor's expression hardened. Family history, education, employment, financial records. The investigator hesitated. "May I ask why?" Victor leaned back slowly. Because he had spent years understanding how threats appeared. And something about Sophia felt dangerous. Not because she was powerful. Not because she was wealthy. But because she was changing things. Eleanor was improving. Ethan was smiling again. Employees had already begun whispering about the mysterious woman appearing beside the CEO. Changes created uncertainty. Victor hated uncertainty. As the investigator left, Victor opened a folder containing old corporate records. Most people would have ignored the name, but it caught his attention instantly. Michael Bennett. The name felt familiar. Disturbingly familiar. Victor stared at it for several seconds. Then a forgotten memory flickered inside his mind. A boardroom. A financial scandal. A ruined businessman. And a secret someone had worked very hard to bury. Back at the hospital, Sophia laughed at something Eleanor said. Neither she nor Ethan noticed the storm quietly gathering around them. But the past was beginning to wake up. And when buried truths finally surfaced, none of their lives would remain the same. By the end of the week, Sophia believed she had become trapped inside a life that didn't belong to her. Every morning, she visited Eleanor. Every afternoon, she returned to her modest apartment. And every evening, she reminded herself that none of this was real. She wasn't Ethan Kingston's wife. She wasn't part of the Kingston family. And sooner or later, everything would end. But then Eleanor received permission to leave the hospital. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. Her recovery had exceeded expectations. There was only one condition. She needed a stable emotional environment, which created a new problem. The moment Eleanor learned she would be returning home, she smiled and asked the question everyone had been avoiding. Wonderful. So when are Ethan and Sophia moving back into the mansion? The room fell silent. Sophia's stomach tightened. Ethan rubbed his temple. Mom. No excuses, Eleanor interrupted. A married couple belongs together. The old woman's stubbornness had not weakened with age. If anything, it had grown stronger. 3 days later, Sophia found herself standing in front of the Kingston estate. Her breath caught. The mansion looked less like a home and more like a private palace. Iron gates stretched across acres of land. Fountains sparkled beneath the afternoon sun. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway. The property alone was worth more money than Sophia could imagine earning in several lifetimes. For a moment, she remembered the house where she had grown up. It wasn't large. It wasn't luxurious. But it had been filled with laughter. Before the scandal, before her father's death, before everything fell apart. The memory disappeared as the mansion doors opened. Inside, Alina immediately wrapped her arms around her. "Welcome home." The words struck Sophia harder than expected, because nobody had said those words to her in years. That evening, Alina insisted on showing Sophia old family photographs. Together, they sat in a quiet sitting room while Ethan attended a business call. One photograph caught Sophia's attention. A beautiful young woman stood beside Ethan. The happiness in his eyes was impossible to miss. "Who is she?" Sophia asked softly. Alina's smile faded. "Claire." The room grew quiet. For the first time, Sophia saw genuine sadness enter the old woman's face. Narrative memories surfaced through Alina's expression. Claire had been part of their lives for years. She had loved Ethan before he became famous, before the billions, before the magazine covers. She had seen the man beneath the success. Then came the accident. A drunk driver. A phone call in the middle of the night. A funeral that shattered an entire family. Alina gently touched the photograph. Ethan never recovered. Sophia glanced toward the doorway. Suddenly, many things made sense. The loneliness. The emotional distance. The walls Ethan kept around himself. Upstairs, however, another discovery was unfolding. Victor sat inside his office, reviewing the investigation report he had ordered. Most of the information appeared ordinary. Employment history, education, financial records. Then he reached a familiar name. Michael Bennett. Victor's face slowly lost color. A memory returned with startling clarity. Years earlier, he had overheard a conversation between his father and another executive. A conversation involving missing money, false evidence, and a man named Michael Bennett. Victor stared at the file, then at Sophia's photograph. His pulse quickened. Because this wasn't a coincidence. Sophia Bennett was the daughter of the very man whose downfall had helped protect a dangerous secret. A secret connected to the Kingston Empire. And if that secret ever resurfaced, powerful people could lose everything. Victor slowly closed the folder. For the first time since Sophia appeared, he wasn't merely suspicious. He was afraid. And fear made dangerous people do dangerous things. A week after moving into the Kingston mansion, Sophia received her first taste of the world Ethan Kingston lived in every day. It arrived in the form of a black velvet box. Inside was a stunning silver evening gown. Sophia stared at it in disbelief. The dress probably cost more than her yearly rent. A small note accompanied it. Charity Gala, 7 p.m. Ethan. Sophia sighed. Another public appearance. Another evening, pretending to be the CEO's wife. Another opportunity for something to go terribly wrong. By 7 o'clock, the ballroom of the Grand Monarch Hotel glittered beneath crystal chandeliers. Politicians mingled with billionaires. Celebrities posed for photographers. Corporate leaders exchanged smiles that often hid ruthless ambitions. Sophia felt completely out of place. Yet when she entered beside Ethan, conversations immediately stopped. Heads turned. Whispers spread. Many guests had heard rumors about the mysterious woman suddenly appearing beside the billionaire CEO. Now they were seeing her for the first time. "You look nervous," Ethan said quietly. "I am nervous. You'll survive." Sophia laughed softly. Very reassuring. To her surprise, Ethan's lips curved slightly. The expression vanished almost immediately. But she noticed. And for some reason, it made her smile. Across the ballroom, Victor watched the interaction. His jaw tightened. Over the past weeks, he had seen changes in Ethan that should have been impossible. The cold CEO was becoming human again. And Sophia Bennett was the reason. Victor couldn't allow that. Not when too much was at stake. not when buried secrets were already beginning to surface. Hours later, as guests gathered around the stage, Victor seized his opportunity. Taking a microphone, he delivered a polished speech about integrity, leadership, and family values. Then he smiled. A dangerous smile. "Speaking of family," Victor said, turning toward Sophia, "it's remarkable how quickly people can reinvent themselves." The room became quieter. Sophia felt Ethan's attention sharpen. Victor continued, "Especially when their family history isn't exactly spotless." A strange feeling settled over the ballroom. Sophia's pulse accelerated. She already knew where this was heading. Years of pain returned instantly. The whispers, the accusations, the shame. Victor looked directly at her. "Tell me, Sophia, is your father the same Michael Bennett involved in one of the largest financial scandals in recent memory?" The room exploded with murmurs. Sophia froze. It felt as though all the air had vanished. Memories flooded back. Reporters outside their home. Neighbors avoiding eye contact. Her father sitting, alone at the kitchen table, after everyone abandoned him. The man who had spent his life helping others. The man who died carrying a reputation he didn't deserve. Victor wasn't attacking her. He was attacking a dead man who couldn't defend himself. Sophia lowered her eyes. Humiliation burned through her chest. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Ethan stood. The room immediately fell silent. The Billionaire CEO calmly took the microphone from Victor's hand. His expression was unreadable. Dangerously unreadable. Victor suddenly looked less confident. Ethan faced the crowd. Then he said something nobody expected. "Michael Bennett was a better man than most people in this room." A stunned silence followed. Even Sophia looked up in shock. Victor's smile disappeared. "What are you talking about?" he asked. Ethan's gaze hardened. For years, people accepted a convenient story. The room listened carefully. Unfortunately, convenience and truth are rarely the same thing. Sophia stared at him. Her heart pounded. Because Ethan sounded certain. Far too certain. As if he knew something about her father's past. Something she didn't. Then Ethan turned toward her. For the briefest moment, their eyes met. And Sophia realized this wasn't over. Victor had intended to humiliate her. Instead, he had awakened a mystery buried for years. A mystery Ethan appeared determined to uncover. And somewhere in that mystery lay the truth about her father's destruction. A truth that powerful people had spent years hiding. The ride back to the Kingston mansion was silent. City lights flashed across the windows of Ethan's luxury sedan as Sophia stared into the darkness outside. Victor's words still echoed in her mind. "Is your father the same Michael Bennett, involved in one of the largest financial scandals in recent memory?" She had spent years trying to escape that question. Yet somehow it always found her. The moment they arrived at the mansion, Sophia headed toward the guest wing. "Wait." Ethan's voice stopped her. She turned. The expression on his face was different from usual. Less guarded. More serious. "I think it's time you knew something." Sophia's stomach tightened. Minutes later, they sat across from each other inside Ethan's private study. The room reflected the life he had built. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Rare artwork. Business awards from around the world. Yet despite all the wealth surrounding him, Ethan looked like a man carrying a burden. For several moments, he simply stared at a photograph resting on his desk. Then he handed it to her. Sophia looked down. Her breath caught. The photograph showed a much younger Ethan. Perhaps 19 years old. Standing beside another man. A man she recognized instantly. Her father. Michael Bennett. Sophia's hands trembled. "What is this?" Ethan leaned back slowly. It's the reason I knew your father's name the moment I heard it. The room seemed to spin. For years, she believed her father's life had never touched the world of billionaires. Yet here was proof they had known each other. The sight unlocked a memory Ethan rarely revisited. Years earlier, long before becoming a CEO, he had been a struggling university student. His father was recovering from a financial setback. Money was tight. Pressure was everywhere. One evening, Ethan's car broke down on an isolated highway. His phone battery died. No one stopped. Except one man. Michael Bennett. The stranger spent hours helping him repair the vehicle. When Ethan offered payment, Michael refused. Instead, he smiled and said, "If you really want to repay me, help someone else one day." The memory remained with Ethan forever, especially because Michael never asked for anything in return. Sophia felt tears forming. That sounded exactly like her father. The same kindness, the same generosity, the same belief that helping people mattered. Ethan's expression darkened. Years later, when the scandal happened, something never felt right. "What do you mean? Your father didn't fit the profile." Sophia frowned. Ethan continued. "People who steal millions usually leave clues, hidden accounts, luxury purchases, suspicious transactions. And I found none." The room grew quiet. A dangerous realization was beginning to form. "My father was innocent." Ethan nodded slowly. "I believe so." Sophia looked down at the photograph again. For the first time in years, hope appeared. Small, fragile, but real. Across town, however, Victor Kingston was reaching a different conclusion. Inside his penthouse office, he stood before a wall safe. His hands shook slightly. The investigation Ethan had quietly launched was getting too close. Far too close. Victor opened an old folder. Inside were documents connected to financial records from years earlier. Records his father had ordered destroyed. Records proving Michael Bennett had been framed. Victor stared at them. His breathing became uneven. A flashback surfaced. Years ago, as a young man, he had accidentally overheard a conversation between his father and another executive. A conversation about missing money, false evidence, and a scapegoat. Michael Bennett. Victor had remained silent, and that silence had protected his family's wealth. Now that silence threatened to destroy everything. Back at the mansion, Sophia carefully placed the photograph on the desk. Neither she nor Ethan noticed that their lives had just become much more dangerous. Because somewhere in the city, a man with everything to lose had finally become afraid. And afraid men rarely make reasonable decisions. For the first time in years, Sophia Bennett went to bed with something she had not felt since her father's death. Hope. Not certainty. Not answers. Just hope. The photograph Ethan had shown her remained vivid in her mind. Her father standing beside a young Ethan Kingston. Smiling. Alive. Respected. The image challenged everything the world had forced her to believe. For years, Sophia had carried the shame of a crime her father never committed. Now, for the first time, someone powerful believed in his innocence. And that someone was willing to fight for the truth. The next morning, Alina immediately noticed the change. "You look happier today," she said while sipping tea in the mansion's sunroom. Sophia smiled. "Do I?" "You do." Alina studied her carefully. Then her eyes drifted toward Ethan, who had just entered the room. A mischievous smile peered on the elderly woman's face. Good. Both Ethan and Sophia knew that smile. It usually meant trouble. Alina pointed toward them. "You two keep looking at each other when you think nobody notices." Sophia nearly spilled her tea. Ethan cleared his throat. "Mom." "What?" Eleanor replied innocently. I may be old, but I'm not blind. The room filled with laughter. Yet beneath the humor, something was changing. Over the past few weeks, Ethan had begun looking forward to moments like these. Simple moments. Quiet moments. The kind of moments he hadn't allowed himself to enjoy since Claire's death. That realization unsettled him. Because this arrangement had started as a lie. Yet the feelings slowly developing inside him felt dangerously real. Later that afternoon, Sophia left the mansion to visit her father's grave. She needed time alone. Time to process everything she had learned. The cemetery sat on a peaceful hill overlooking the city. She placed fresh flowers beside the headstone. For several minutes, she simply stood there. The wind gently moved through the trees. I think I finally found someone who believes you, she whispered. Tears formed in her eyes. I wish you were here. A short distance away, an unfamiliar black SUV sat parked near the cemetery entrance. Its tinted windows concealed the occupants. Inside, two men watched Sophia carefully. One of them lifted a phone. She's here. A pause. Then a voice answered. Don't do anything yet. The call ended. The men continued watching. Unseen. Patient. Dangerously patient. That evening, Ethan received unexpected news. One of his investigators entered his office carrying a file. We found something. Ethan immediately looked up. What is it? The original financial records connected to Michael Bennett's case. The investigator placed the documents on the desk. Ethan opened the folder. His expression darkened instantly. Because the evidence confirmed his suspicions. The records had been altered. Deliberately. Systematically. And someone inside Kingston Global had authorized it. The investigator hesitated. There's more. Ethan looked up. The approval signatures lead toward executives connected to your uncle. The room fell silent. His uncle. Victor's father. The realization hit like a hammer. Suddenly, years of inconsistencies began making sense. But before Ethan could respond, another call came through. His assistant sounded alarmed. Mr. Kingston, we've got a problem. Ethan stood immediately. What happened? We lost contact with Miss Bennett's security detail. His blood ran cold. Earlier that day, Ethan had quietly assigned protection to Sophia. Not because she knew it, but because he feared Victor might become desperate. Now that fear was becoming reality. At that exact moment, Sophia walked toward her car in the cemetery parking lot. The area was nearly empty. The sun was beginning to set. She reached for her door handle, then froze. A strange feeling crawled up her spine. The instinctive feeling of being watched. Slowly, she turned around. Nobody was there. Yet the black SUV she'd noticed earlier was still parked nearby. Its engine was running. And as she stared at it, the vehicle slowly began moving toward her. Back at Kingston Global headquarters, Ethan grabbed his keys and headed for the exit. For the first time in years, genuine fear gripped him. Not fear of losing money. Not fear of losing power. Fear of losing someone. And that realization terrified him more than anything else. Because if Sophia Bennett was in danger, he already knew one thing. He would do absolutely anything to protect her. The black SUV continued rolling slowly toward Sophia. Every instinct inside her screamed that something was wrong. The cemetery parking lot was nearly empty now. The few visitors who had been there earlier had already left. Only the sound of the wind moving through the trees remained. Sophia tightened her grip on her handbag. The SUV stopped several yards away. The driver's door opened. A large man stepped out. Then another. Neither looked like they were visiting a grave. Sophia's heartbeat accelerated. One of the men smiled. but there was nothing friendly about it. Miss Bennet. The way he said her name made her stomach twist. Without answering, Sophia took a small step backward. The second man moved subtly to block another path. A trap. The realization struck instantly. They knew who she was, and they had come prepared. At that same moment, Ethan's vehicle raced through city traffic. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. The investigators' findings replayed inside his mind. The forged documents, the altered records, the signatures connected to Victor's father. The deeper he dug, the uglier the truth became. For years, someone had manipulated evidence to destroy Michael Bennet. And now someone appeared willing to silence his daughter. His phone rang. Daniel, his assistant. We traced the SUV. What did you find? It belongs to a private security company, frequently used by one of Victor Kingston's associates. Ethan's jaw tightened. The connection wasn't enough for an arrest, but it was enough to deepen his suspicions. Far too much was pointing toward Victor. Back at the cemetery, Sophia forced herself to remain calm. What do you want? The first man shrugged. Nothing serious. Then why are you here? The smile vanished. Some people think you're asking dangerous questions. The words sent a chill through her body. Dangerous questions. Questions about her father. Questions about the scandal. Questions someone clearly wanted buried forever. Before either man could move closer, another sound suddenly echoed across the parking lot. Tires screeching. A black luxury sedan appeared at the entrance. The vehicle accelerated directly toward them. The two men exchanged alarmed looks. They recognized the car instantly. So did Sophia. Ethan. The SUV's occupants retreated immediately. Within seconds, they were speeding away. Ethan jumped from his vehicle before it fully stopped. Are you hurt? Sophia shook her head. No. The relief in his eyes appeared only briefly. But she saw it. For a moment, neither spoke. The fear of what almost happened hung heavily between them. Then Ethan made a decision. You're not leaving the mansion alone again. Sophia blinked. What? I'm serious. Ethan. No. His voice softened slightly. Not until this is over. Something about the way he said it felt different. Less like an order. More like concern. Real concern. The kind people couldn't fake. Later that evening, they returned to the mansion. Alina immediately noticed the tension. What happened? Nothing, Ethan answered quickly. Alina narrowed her eyes. That means something happened. Sophia couldn't help smiling. Even after everything, Alina remained impossible to fool. As they sat together in the living room, Alina began flipping through an old family photo album. Most of the photographs featured family gatherings, holidays, and business celebrations. Then one image caught her attention. Oh. Her expression changed. Ethan looked up. What is it? Alina stared at the photograph, her eyes widening slightly. This man. Ethan took the photo. His pulse quickened. Standing beside Victor's father at a corporate event was another executive. A man who had vanished shortly after Michael Bennet's downfall. A man investigators had never successfully located. A man believed to have handled financial approvals during the scandal. For years, nobody knew where he went. But Alina suddenly remembered something. He moved overseas. The room became silent. Ethan leaned forward. How do you know? Alina pointed at the photograph. Your father told me. A memory surfaced through the fog of age. Not perfect, but clear enough. He said that man left the country after receiving a large payment. The room froze. Sophia's heart pounded. Because if Alina's memory was correct, it changed everything. It meant the missing executive hadn't disappeared randomly. He had been paid, possibly to stay silent, possibly to help frame her father. Ethan looked at the photograph again, then at Sophia. Another piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. And somewhere across the city, Victor Kingston received news that made his blood run cold. The witness they had spent years trying to hide might still be alive. And if Ethan found him first, the entire conspiracy would collapse. For the first time, Victor realized something terrifying. The truth was no longer buried. It was coming for him. Sleep became impossible that night. While the rest of the mansion grew quiet, Ethan sat alone in his study, staring at the photograph Alina had uncovered. The missing executive. The forgotten face. The man who might finally expose the truth. For years, the investigation into Michael Bennett's downfall had led nowhere. Witnesses disappeared. Records vanished. Key people suddenly forgot important details. Every path seemed intentionally blocked. Now, for the first time, a door had opened, and Ethan intended to walk through it. The following morning, his private investigation team worked nonstop. Hours later, one of them rushed into the study. "We found him." Ethan immediately stood. "Where?" "Portugal." The investigator placed a file on the desk. New name, new identity, new life. Sophia, who had been sitting nearby, felt her pulse quicken. After all these years, someone connected to her father's case had finally been found. Ethan opened the file. The man's name had once been Arthur Hayes, former senior financial executive, one of the last people to handle the accounts involved in the scandal. The same man who vanished immediately after Michael Bennett was blamed. "What else?" Ethan asked. The investigator hesitated. He recently contacted a lawyer. "Why?" "He wants immunity." The room fell silent. Sophia felt her breath catch. People only ask for immunity when they have something serious to confess. Something criminal. Something dangerous. Something capable of destroying powerful people. Across the city, Victor Kingston received the same news. And panic exploded inside him. His hands shook as he read the report. Arthur Hayes had been found. Years of secrets were unraveling. The carefully constructed lie protecting his family was beginning to collapse. For a brief moment, Victor remembered the day everything started. He had been young, barely out of college. His father had called him into a private office. Victor still remembered every word. Some truths are too expensive to tell. At the time, he didn't fully understand. Later, he learned exactly what his father meant. Millions had disappeared. Investors needed a culprit. Michael Bennett became the perfect target. An honest man. A trusting man. A man incapable of imagining how far corrupt people would go. Victor had spent years convincing himself he wasn't responsible. After all, he hadn't created the lie. He had merely protected it. But deep down, he knew the truth. Silence can be just as guilty as action. Back at the mansion, a video conference was arranged. Sophia sat beside Ethan. Her hands trembled. After several moments, the screen flickered to life. An older man appeared. Gray-haired. Tired. Burdened. Arthur Hayes. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Arthur looked directly at Sophia. Tears filled his eyes. "I'm sorry." The words shattered something inside her. Because they sounded sincere. Painfully sincere. Arthur lowered his head. "Your father was innocent." Sophia's world seemed to stop. For years, she had dreamed of hearing those words. Now they felt almost impossible to process. Arthur continued, voice shaking. Michael Bennett tried to stop the fraud. A flashback unfolded through his confession. Years earlier, Michael had discovered irregular financial transfers. Instead of ignoring them, he demanded answers. Instead of participating, he reported concerns. That decision sealed his fate. Powerful executives realized he was a threat. So they framed him, forged records, manipulated evidence, destroyed his reputation. Arthur wiped away tears. They threatened my family. The room remained silent. They told me if I testified, my wife and children would suffer. Sophia closed her eyes. Every missing piece was finally connecting. Every mystery, every inconsistency, every unanswered question. Her father had not fallen because he was weak. He had fallen because he tried to do the right thing. Arthur took a deep breath, then delivered the final blow. The people responsible were Victor's father and the executives working with him. Sophia looked toward Ethan. The truth was finally exposed. But before relief could settle in, Ethan's phone suddenly rang. Daniel's voice exploded through the speaker. "Mr. Kingston, we've got an emergency." Ethan's expression hardened. "What happened?" "Victor just resigned." The room fell silent. That alone was alarming. What came next was, "We believe he's trying to leave the country." Sophia's stomach dropped. Because innocent people don't run. And desperate people are often at their most dangerous. Several thousand feet above the city, a private jet was already being prepared for departure. Victor Kingston stood beside it, watching the crew work, watching the clock, watching his entire world collapse. Because for the first time in years, there was nowhere left to hide. And the next few hours would determine whether he escaped justice or finally paid for everything. Sleep became impossible that night. While the rest of the mansion grew quiet, Ethan sat alone in his study, staring at the photograph Alina had uncovered. The missing executive. The forgotten face. The man who might finally expose the truth. For years, the investigation into Michael Bennett's downfall had led nowhere. Witnesses disappeared. Records vanished. Key people suddenly forgot important details. Every path seemed intentionally blocked. Now, for the first time, a door had opened. And Ethan intended to walk through it. The following morning, his private investigation team worked nonstop. Hours later, one of them rushed into the study. "We found him." Ethan immediately stood. "Where?" "Portugal." The investigator placed a file on the desk. New name, new identity, new life. Sophia, who had been sitting nearby, felt her pulse quicken. After all these years, someone connected to her father's case had finally been found. Ethan opened the file. The man's name had once been Arthur Hayes, former senior financial executive, one of the last people to handle the accounts involved in the scandal. The same man who vanished immediately after Michael Bennett was blamed. "What else?" Ethan asked. The investigator hesitated. He recently contacted a lawyer. "Why?" "He wants immunity." The room fell silent. Sophia felt her breath catch. People only ask for immunity when they have something serious to confess. Something criminal. Something dangerous. Something capable of destroying powerful people. Across the city, Victor Kingston received the same news. And panic exploded inside him. His hands shook as he read the report. Arthur Hayes had been found. Years of secrets were unraveling. The carefully constructed lie protecting his family was beginning to collapse. For a brief moment, Victor remembered the day everything started. He had been young, barely out of college. His father had called him into a private office. Victor still remembered every word. Some truths are too expensive to tell. At the time, he didn't fully understand. Later, he learned exactly what his father meant. Millions had disappeared. Investors needed a culprit. Michael Bennett became the perfect target. An honest man. A trusting man. A man incapable of imagining how far corrupt people would go. Victor had spent years convincing himself he wasn't responsible. After all, he hadn't created the lie. He had merely protected it. But deep down, he knew the truth. Silence can be just as guilty as action. Back at the mansion, a video conference was arranged. Sophia sat beside Ethan. Her hands trembled. After several moments, the screen flickered to life. An older man appeared. Gray-haired. Tired. Burdened. Arthur Hayes. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Arthur looked directly at Sophia. Tears filled his eyes. "I'm sorry." The words shattered something inside her. Because they sounded sincere. Painfully sincere. Arthur lowered his head. "Your father was innocent." Sophia's world seemed to stop. For years, she had dreamed of hearing those words. Now they felt almost impossible to process. Arthur continued, voice shaking. Michael Bennett tried to stop the fraud. A flashback unfolded through his confession. Years earlier, Michael had discovered irregular financial transfers. Instead of ignoring them, he demanded answers. Instead of participating, he reported concerns. That decision sealed his fate. Powerful executives realized he was a threat. So they framed him, forged records, manipulated evidence, destroyed his reputation. Arthur wiped away tears. "They threatened my family." The room remained silent. "They told me if I testified, my wife and children would suffer." Sophia closed her eyes. Every missing piece was finally connecting. Every mystery. Every inconsistency. Every unanswered question. Her father had not fallen because he was weak. He had fallen because he tried to do the right thing. Arthur took a deep breath, then delivered the final blow. The people responsible were Victor's father and the executives working with him. Sophia looked toward Ethan. The truth was finally exposed. But before relief could settle in, Ethan's phone suddenly rang. Daniel's voice exploded through the speaker. "Mr. Kingston, we've got an emergency." Ethan's expression hardened. "What happened?" "Victor just resigned." The room fell silent. That alone was alarming. What came next was, "We believe he's trying to leave the country." Sophia's stomach dropped. Because innocent people don't run. And desperate people are often at their most dangerous. Several thousand feet above the city, a private jet was already being prepared for departure. Victor Kingston stood beside it, watching the crew work, watching the clock, watching his entire world collapse. Because for the first time in years, there was nowhere left to hide. And the next few hours would determine whether he escaped justice or finally paid for everything.